That's what's happening.
Yeah, I'm afraid doing it on my
Oh,
phone, I'm gonna get blown up because my phone will start ringing and texts, and I'm
yeah.
like nonstop right now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think we just went live, Darren.
oh, we did?
I think so. Looks like I see that
We're
little
live.
live box up top. So, welcome to the show, Darren.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Fair warning, I am doing this from my cell phone as opposed to my laptop. So I apologize if random calls or texts come up. I tried to block it off. I do have my phone on silent, so we'll see if that works. I don't know.
Well, and that makes two of us, Darren. So don't worry. Misery loves company, and I was actually doing a demo here in New York State. So I was out in the field, and it's a good thing to be so busy that I couldn't make it back to the home office. So I'm joining you on my cell phone as well. So
Well, upstate New York's beautiful, so I hope
it
you're.
is. We caught some beautiful weather too. I mean, it's been raining here, but it's 65 and sunny and blue skies and green as green can be. So a nice change from the desert where I was last time we did this. So
Oh, that's right. That's right. You were in New Mexico last time we did this?
absolutely. So anyways, well, happy Cinco de Mayo, Darren.
Whoop, whoop. It's actually a
Whoop, whoop.
continuation celebration of my birthday because my birthday is May 4th. May the 4th be with you. So people are just continuing the celebration from Quattro de Mayo to Cinco de Mayo in honor
I
of
love it.
I like to
Oh,
think in part in honor of me, but
yeah.
that's just my
I mean, that's why I'm gonna have a margarita tonight. So
yes.
well,
Part of
cool, Darren. I mean, I suppose since we are off to a little bit later of a start, maybe we should just kind of pop in and we'll start out with some quick introductions in case you guys weren't here last time. My name is Caleb Johnson. I'm the Director of Customer Success for Terra Vera. I've been in the cannabis industry now for just over, or I should say just under 10 years. Um, my role here at the company is, as I said, the director of customer success, but that really entails me going out and working directly hands-on with the client, as well as doing trainings and deployment of these units. And we have a wide swath of experience traveling from coast to coast and going in and out of different gardens. In fact, today was the third New York State garden that I've seen, so I feel like I'm finally starting to get my licks up here in this region of the country. Darren, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Darrin Potter. I'm a 15 plus year cannabis industry veteran in the legal market. My time before that, well, we'll just leave that where it lie. Um, I am in a fractional role with Terra Vera. I've been part of Terra Vera since 2019. So, I was a grower and used Terra Vera and transitioned into a participant in Terra Vera, even though I was continuing, as a grower and working with large scale operations around the country. But I believe in the product, love the product, and it works. And, it's safe. And that's why I've always been, focused on being a part of it one way or another. So I work in market development, which includes everything from formulation, new products, and emerging into new markets. Doing some work with blueberry farmers, different crop coffee, etc. So obviously, I've worked in cannabis for a really long time, so I do most of my work in cannabis. But I'm always working on just trying to make some changes in agriculture beyond cannabis, and I think Terra Vera is one of those big changes that I'd like to see in agriculture in general, just from a pesticide standpoint. When you think about like wine and stuff like that, what is it, like 88 or 81% of all wine has trace elements of pesticides, and I think what is that, 40% of it is myclobutanol. So, definitely would love to see people transition into a safer means of fungal pathogen remediation, and resolving those issues and pest pressure as well. So that's why I'm involved.
Absolutely. Just as kind of a sidebar, I just left a farm in the Hudson Valley region of New York State, and they believe in regenerative farming practices, organic practices, and it was really quite amazing how well we fit into the goal of, as a company, how Terra Vera fits into the goal of sustainability, regenerative farming practices, and really making a dent in how we look at agriculture. It was pretty cool. The feedback was, wow, you guys are doing something that no one else is doing in this space. So it's really cool. But to get started, last time we talked, this is part 2 of our IPM discussion, and last time we left off, we covered a lot of great topics. We talked about PPE, we talked about having a process, we talked about possible vectors, and all of those things. And I think for where we are today, and based on where we were in the list, I think we should start this one out, Darrin, by talking about BCA programs. So let's start with, what is a BCA program, and if I'm using BCAs, how do I incorporate BCAs with other treatments? And in this instance, how would I incorporate BCAs with a Terra Vera, for instance?
Sure. So I think the first thing when you think of BCAs is you should know what it stands for. I got that question a couple of weeks ago. They're like, well, what does BCA even mean? Even though they kind of knew that it was for predators or beneficial predators. And I was like, oh, well, that's your biological control agents. And that's just, BCA is short for biological control agent. So, definitely, understand the acronym, right? That's one. And that's exactly what we're doing, right? We're using biological control. So, assassin bugs, lace wings, Swirsky, Persimilis, there's a huge list of beneficial predators, and some of them attack a large swath of pests, mites, aphids, thrips, etc. And some of them are very focused. So first thing is, understand what it is. So we're just talking about beneficial predators, and how to implement them in the garden, right? A lot of people think, oh, well, BCAs are really for outdoor or for, greenhouses or shade houses and things like that, not really specifically for indoor. And it's like, no, they're absolutely for indoor. Matter of fact, I see BCAs used significantly across the country, indoor and internationally as well. So, beneficial predators, you're going to have your nematodes, your lacewings, like I said, your predator mites, Swirsky, Cucumeris, Andersoni, Persimilis, etc. And then you get into some I think I touched on nematodes, but like, assassin bugs, just, different predators to attack your pests in the garden that you typically face.
Darrin, this is and I actually don't know the answer to this. Would certain types of bacillus, is that still considered a BCA, or is that a different topic?
Yeah, it's kind of a different topic. That's going to be more in your
Okay.
microbiology, which
Okay.
I kind of consider that into your BCA program to a degree, because you're applying microbiologicals to your plants to defend against whether it be fungal pathogens or even attacking aphids or attacking different bugs. So you can consider that and incorporate that, because it is a biological control. In my mind,
Right.
I can separate the two, I guess, but essentially, yes, it's a biological control. So yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely.
And so the idea with the BCA programs is that if you're up against, let's pick on spider mites today. So if you're up against spider mites, these beneficials, or these BCAs, these biological agents, are coming in and killing, eating, infecting the problem, and then in turn eradicating the issue from your garden.
100%, yes, and you hit it spot on. Infecting or parasitizing, which I love, because some of
Yeah.
these bugs will actually inject the larva of their progeny into an insect that we're trying to attack, and then the babies just burst out, right? So it's pretty crazy to think about how these different predator bugs attack the pests that we have to face on a daily basis in the garden.
And then going from BCAs up, I mean, is a praying mantis, a ladybug, is that still considered part of the BCA program? Okay.
Yeah. Ladybugs eat mites, and yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's all
Excellent.
part of it. Yeah, I haven't seen people really release really hard ladybugs in indoor. Usually, I see people doing a lot of Andersoni, Swirsky, Persimilis here. Basically, you have like almost like not air guns, but blowers we'll use to kind of blow our BCAs throughout a large area of the garden. and they actually make some now. I'm not sure which company is doing it right now, but there's a few companies now that actually, we used to like hand make blowers and literally use like leaf blowers and release bugs. Now there's more effective ways to do it, 10, 15 years later. But
Right.
I think really important though, also when you're talking about BCAs, is understanding the seasonality of your pests, right? So like, pests, not all pests are year round. They certainly can be in an indoor garden where you're controlling the environment and it's like spring, autumn, fall, pretty much, you're having those seasons all the time. But, understanding environmentally outside of your structure, what time of year these pests actually come up. So as an example, like aphids are going to be late spring, autumn, but maybe not all aphids, right? Melon aphids, I want to say, are typically going to be like, maybe like September, October. So it's really important to understand the seasonality of the pests that you're facing. Like mites is a perfect example, right? Mites are going to come around in the summer, oftentimes when it's starting to get really warm and your temperatures are rising. So, like a July, August kind of thing scenario. So understanding that seasonality. Um,
Got it.
aphids are going
Okay.
to be October. So.
Well, on that same vein, so I'm gonna put my shoes in the or my feet in the shoes of the cultivator right now, and I'm gonna release my BCAs. But on top of BCAs, I also have other issues in my garden. So I've got powdery mildew, I've got aspergillus, I've got E. coli, I've got fungal pathogens and issues along those lines, and I want to spray you know another chemical. Let's call it. I want to use Terra Vera in the garden um, with a BCA program. Can you kind of help me understand how one would
Sure.
go around doing that?
Sure, sure. But once again, before I go there, and before that thought, when you think about pests and you think about fungal pathogens, your pests can be a cause of the spread of fungal pathogens, right? Like your powdery
Sure.
mildew, aphids spread probably about, I would say insects spread 80% of the viruses that we see. That's pretty common knowledge of that we see in plants. They also spread spores, right? So if an aphid is chumming around through, some PM, they're a winged aphid, right? They're going to fly to the next plant, the next plant, the next plant. So
Yep.
understanding how that can spread through your garden is really important. But from an application standpoint with chemistry and BCAs, I tell people this all the time, and I always pray that it sticks. But it's sometimes it takes some hand holding. We gotta walk through it, and we actually got to write it out. We got to put it on a chart and create their schedule for them, which I love to do as well. Um, but I always say sterilize and then inoculate. Sterilize, whether it's an oxidant, whatever kind of chemistry you're using, even oils, whatever the case may be, depending on the stage and the life cycle of the plant. It's really important to understand that you apply a chemistry before you do a release, right? I wouldn't do a release and then spray a chemistry. It's counterproductive. The likelihood that you're possibly going to kill some of your beneficial predators or slow them down, right, which you don't want to do, it is, that risk goes up significantly. So I always tell people, no matter what chemistry you're using, obviously we're talking Terra Vera. So, I would spray the plants first, and then probably within 24 to 48 hours later, you're very safe to do a release. I mean, the next day you can do a release, but what you don't want to do is release your predators and then the very next day spray, because there's a likelihood that you could potentially affect them, whether you kill some or whether you just slow them down, right? And you don't ever want to slow your beneficial predators down. Um,
Well, and to go into some of the other applications that are out there, specifically in the use of cannabis. So if I was to take my my predators, release them, and then I was to go back with some kind of an oil-based product that is attacking not only molds and mildews and things of that nature, but it's also attacking insects because of it's suffocating. It's a suffocant, right? um, that would lead to your point around it's counterintuitive to not time and think about the strategy for having a BCA program.
yeah, absolutely. Um,
Okay.
and just kind of to add on that, it's really important to understand BCA stands for biological control agent, not biological elimination agent, right? So BCA aren't really, it's not like if you have a huge infestation, you're like, oh, let's just release, because that's likely not going to get rid of your problem. So
Right.
what you really want to do is do what we call a knockback. So you're going to do some kind of chemical application, preferably 25B, OMRI. And I always tell people, please confirm with what your state is approved, what you have registered in the state is approved for pesticide application. It's wildly important, specifically in cannabis, because the regulations vary so greatly from state to state. And
Yep.
it can be the difference between having sellable product and non-sellable product, right? I see that a lot. And it's really just education. It's really simple because you can just contact the state, whether it's your Department of Agriculture or whether it's your Cannabis Control Commission or Cannabis Control Board or Office of Medical Marijuana Use, whatever the regulating agency is, they have that list, right? So you can see, myclobutanol, abamectin, whatever the case may be, those might not be approved in your state. Pyrethrins might be approved in some states, but not in others. So it's really important to understand what's approved, and then knock back, control, not just control, but really try to eliminate as much of that population as possible. And then you're going to do an inoculation or a release, right? And when I say,
Gotcha.
sterilize and inoculate, that doesn't just mean for your predators. It also means for your microbiological, your bacillus and such as well. It's not just specifically your predators, also your microbiological agents that you may be applying to your plant to either parasitize or kill your pests or your fungal pathogens.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think much like anything, having a schedule and having a plan around whether it's you're spraying a chemical or you're releasing bugs, it sounds like having a plan and making sure that you're educated around not only the species that you're releasing, but also the species that you're trying to eradicate. But it is possible to run a program within one of these cultivations that both incorporates BCAs as well as, oxidant programs and oil-based programs and things of that nature.
Yep, 100%. And with your
Awesome.
BCA, you should always know that there are storage requirements that are really very important to understand with BCAs. And when you're storing them in high heat and high relative humidity, the lifespan will likely not be very long. So
Right.
I always tell people try to release within 24 to 48 hours of receiving your BCAs on site. Otherwise, the likelihood of survival, obviously they have some cereal, they have some things they can live off of for a little while, but BCAs, they need food, right? So you need to release them in the garden. The other thing is where time of year you're releasing them and where you're releasing them. So as an example, some greenhouses or some outdoor gardens, it can get very hot, and understand the threshold of the organism before applying, right? Don't just buy something that it was cool and then, I'm just going to release a bunch of Swarovski or Persimolis or Andersoni or, and understand the life cycle of that bug, right? So as an example, I would people lacewing larva is my preference instead of lacewing adult because you're going to get greater efficacy with the larva. It's my 2 cents.
So just before we kind of wrap up the BCA part of this, Darrin, is there any recommendations that you would give on a good place for somebody who's not familiar with it and is interested? Is there a company? Is there a group that you would recommend that somebody gets their start at?
There's a lot of great companies out there. I do a lot of work with Steven over at BioBee, Chris Hayes over at BioWorks, Beneficial Insectary. There's a lot of great resources out there and a lot of great PhDs. I've actually organized for a couple large national companies, an education platform to where they'll get on with these PhDs, entomologists, folks that have been in horticulture for 20 to 30 plus years, focusing on nothing but BCAs, just to educate their own staff, right? Their own integrated pest management teams who are, just getting into applying and understanding how these bugs work and these chemistries work. So I always recommend that is, education, right? Learn all the time, myself included.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Mind my thumb there. All right. So I think this is a good place for us to, kind of turn off into something else, Darrin. And I want to talk about oils, oils and cannabis use specifically and ag use specifically. When to use oils, when not to use oils. help me understand, best case scenario, worst case scenario, and then let's start there.
Sorry, if you see me go like this every once in a while, it's because I'm flicking away text because I'm on my phone right now. So I apologize for that. Oils. So yeah, obviously oils have been around for a very long time, essential oils for cannabis, or rather plants in general in horticulture, and obviously in cannabis as well. And I would say that the industry in some regards has a love-hate relationship with oils. Obviously, we're growing cannabis plants to extract the oil from the plant, and there are concerns from an extraction process standpoint of some of those polymers, some of those oils, binding to each other and or carrying over into the finished product. So totally understand that, and I respect that a lot. And I'm a fan of heavily using oil in flowers by means, and that is the reason I'm going to there because it's not in the flower, right? Residual is amino acids, which is the oils. So I would always say your stage, so your propagation, your veg, perfectly safe time and area to use oils. Going to flower, personally, I don't really like to go past 3. If I can get into week 1 and week 2, if I have to use it, I don't often use oils personally, but that would be the stages that I would recommend. I definitely would not recommend past week 3. I think it could be potentially detrimental to your plant. I don't think it's necessary. There's different means of mitigating pest pressure and pathogen pressure without having to spray oils past week 3 for sure. But there's always that, pardon my language, there's that oh shit moment. Whether your receiving didn't get something in on time, and just things happen in operations as they always do, and you're left with a no choice of this is what I've got, this is what I have to use. Ultimately, there's resources that you can utilize to get away from heavy use of oils, specifically
Right.
flour.
So, I mean, I'm gonna chirp up with oils too, and based on my experience, and specifically my experience at Terra Vera, it's been very interesting to me with a lot of oil-based products, the precursor for what these oils are, and to your point, the dangers and the risks of applying oils in late-stage flower. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, read the front of the label. They don't necessarily read the back and the fine print. And I think with some of these oils, be it that they're safe, they're OMRI listed, things of that nature, they really can be pretty damning to the garden, especially when applied outside of what it was that you were just mentioning, where if you're using I'll pick on neem because I think it's probably one of the more common oils used. I think a lot of people know and are aware of what neem is used for. That oil it can leave a residue, and it does have the potential to be dangerous to the end user, whether that be that they're combusting the flower, whether that be that they're consuming it through an oil or an edible or a live process. But it is something that is I'm happy. I'm in the same school of thought with you of, try and get away from those oh shit moments. And again, pardon my French, but get away from those moments where you're forced into a position and look into other options for being able to control these types of issues that are that people are using oil to combat.
Yeah. I mean, we can easily. Neem is one that's I'll say picked on a lot, and there's a lot of concern around it, right? And to the end user and what that can cause from in the respiratory system, etc. But pyrethrin is a perfect example as well, right? There's plenty of OMRI certified pyrethrins, and I think a lot of people don't take into consideration how pyrethrins, for example, and chrysanthemums, the plants they're derived from, those chemicals can change with other chemicals being applied, right? So a lot of times in tank mixing and things like that, a lot of people don't think about, okay, I'm putting this chemistry in here and I'm putting this chemistry in here, but they're not thinking about the chemical reaction and what actually can occur in creating different molecular structures, right?
Right.
Which are in your state, in certain states like that. and understanding the carryover and how long that specific pesticide might stay on the plant, right? It may not be systemic, but it may carry over in the plant for some time. So
Right.
therefore, you may end up failing a test and losing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars of product where, you're sitting there reading the label. Oh, this is OMRI certified. This is safe. This is good. But then all of a sudden you pop hot for Piper butanol or whatever, something. And you're like, what? I wasn't even using that. It's not on the label. I'm just using
Yeah.
all my, but it could be that temperature may change the molecular structure, or other chemistries that you're applying it with may change the molecular structure to create a compound that you might not, be legally allowed to use. So those are things that people need to take into consideration.
So another thing too, Darrin, and when applying oils in your garden, so you've gotten to the point where you're using oils, and um, what are some of the other risks associated with applying oil, let's say, um, in the summer months or in a less than controlled environment? So let's say a subpar indoor environment, and you're going to apply oils to your garden. What are some of the other considerations that you should think of before going down that path?
Yeah, and we talked about this in our last conversation, infrastructure, right? And then infrastructure applies to all different types of, whether it's
Oh,
greenhouse or indoor, it doesn't really matter. So your mechanical systems, right? One, mechanical systems fail. Things fail. But two, a lot of times people might try to save a dollar and maybe undersize and not creating the ideal environment for their cultivation. So, that plays a role in the application of your chemistries, right? If you're in 90-degree weather, as an example, whether it be in a greenhouse, which I've certainly seen greenhouses, upwards towards 120 degrees, where the stomata closed, the plant's not happy. And that could have been from a damper not opening, whatever the case may be, right? But so, when you're applying these oils, and no different with oxidants, right? Oxidants very similar. In very high temperatures, definitely when you're getting close to that 90 degree, one, oils can be damaging to the plants for sure. And just overall less effective. Same thing with oxidants, right? Oxidants are oxygen molecules. The higher the temperature, the oxygen will essentially gas off, break off. So oxidants are also going to be less effective in really high temperatures. So it's really important to understand, you know, your environmental impact, not just from the planet, but also to your environment within your cultivation, within your garden. How how useful it is when applying these chemistries. You're really high relative humidity or really high temperature. Which, let's face it, we've all
right.
seen in the 90s at some point in time in our life, and it's either failure or poorly sized mechanical systems, or you know poorly designed infrastructure.
And Darrin, just to kind of touch on one last thing that I didn't hear you say is, I mean, there is a lot of consideration when applying oils, especially in an indoor, I mean, in any kind of setting, I suppose, but oils will in fact magnify UV. That's correct, right? And you can potentially cause burning on the surface of your plant when using oils. So if timed improperly, you can actually cause pretty severe damage to the surface of your plant or the tissue of your plant if not done correctly or considerately.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And usually that's why I try to tell people to do their sprays later in the evening, when the sun's on its way down, if you're in a greenhouse or outdoor in a greenhouse, whatever. And then indoor, obviously, at the end of your day, so that you don't have any magnification of light or, causing any scenarios. But, and then it comes down to, and this comes with any application, and I do a lot of training and education on that, is, having the right saturation point, right? You can very easily oversaturate, specifically with oils, on your plants, and yeah, that's why we'll put spray cards out. So that way we can, put spray cards out, have our teams go out, they'll spray, and we'll go collect the spray cards in those zones, letter them for those zones, and make sure that we obviously know who's spraying in those zones. We create a schedule, and then you can look at the efficacy of that applicator, and you can test them. You can use that as a training tool. So. Yeah, doing
Right.
that later on in the evening is definitely an important thing. Not in full
Okay.
sun.
Cool.
That's major.
Cool. Well, I want to go back into something that you had touched around, and both of the other kind of the other topics, and I just want to make sure that we kind of drive this point home is, the approval of your pesticides, the rotation, the seasonal, pressure that you're having, and making sure that you're in accordance with your state and your regulatory bodies. We don't have to do another full deep dive into this, guys, but I do want to just, to back what Darrin's saying on that. I think it is so incredibly important that people educate themselves on what is allowed in their state to avoid any kind of costly failed testing or recalls, as well as, you know, the safety and efficacy of the chemistry when it comes not only to your plant, but also to your applicators, to the water table below your building, to the field that you're spraying in. It is very important and something that everyone should be considering. So right in the same line, Darrin, let's talk about tank mixing and when is this applicable and when is it necessary?
Oh, I'm losing you for a second there, Caleb, but I think the last thing you said was tank mixing. So, yeah, I've done a bunch of work on tank mixing. I actually have a very specific list that I use of what I know works very efficiently and effectively. Oh man, I lost my Caleb. Um, but when it comes to tank mixing, it's really important to read the label, understand the label, talk to the manufacturer. They'll also have recommendations on what you can tank mix. But tank mixes are applicable, I would say, in oils for sure. Some and then beneficials. If you're doing a beneficial application, there are certain beneficials that are work well with each other, and there are certain beneficials that don't work well with each other. I was carrying on when I was like, "Oh, Caleb's gone. I'll just keep on with tank mixing."
Sorry.
But yeah.
Yeah,
So
not sure what happened there. I apologize.
no problem, man. But tank mixes is really important. You don't want to mix oxidants, right? You don't want to have like two different oxidants and mix them together and apply, right? That's where that would be really dangerous because you have an oxidant potential, and the plant can only take so much of a threshold, right? So that's really important. And mixing oxidants with oils, not really the smartest, the best thing to do. So there are very specific mixes that you can do. And what I was saying is I would always speak to the manufacturer. I would always read the label, and I would always confirm it. And then even in application, right? You might think that it's okay to tank mix something. Even the manufacturer might tell you that, oh yeah, that should be fine. Trial things, right? Don't just spray it on your garden and be like, oh, well, I'm going to spray this all over the garden. The manufacturer said it's okay. Like, no. Take a small setting of plant, apply it, and then observe it for 72 hours or so. And then if you even want to take it a step further, just to be really, really safe, to make sure that those chemistries that you've just mixed in a tank, 2 to 3 chemistries, which I've done easily up to 3 different chemistries. And like I said, I have a list that I live and die by because I know it works. And I've got about 20 different tank mixes that are, I'm very successful with. But I would take that mix if somebody gave me a recommendation, and then I would take that leaf after a 72 hour, whatever, week or so application. I would take it into a lab and just test it, just to make sure that you're not mixing chemistries in developing a compound that might be prohibited in your state, like I talked about with pyrethroids. So it's really important to understand that whenever you're doing any kind of application, that you're not mixing anything specifically to oxidants or chemistries that might be combative against each other, or and basically eliminate each other essentially, or create a chemistry that you weren't specifically intending to create and applying to the plant, right? That can
Sure.
be very dangerous.
Sure. No, I I think there's a lot of horror stories out there of, people doing very simple mixes. And I mean, this isn't just in agriculture. I mean, this is in the restaurant industry. You mix bleach and ammonia and you create something that you really don't want to come in contact with. And it can be really dangerous, to your point, uh, from a health and safety issue that, I mean, it's very, very, very serious.
Yeah, worker protection standards. Look it up. It's really important.
Okay, cool. Well, Darrin, let's keep moving forward. Um, yeah, yep, absolutely. So Darrin, when we're talking about applying these different types of chemicals to the garden and different types of tools, let's get into the tools for the job. What is the right tool for the job? And do I use a fogger? Do I use a sprayer? Do I use an atomizer? Do I use a sachet? Do I use, there's so many different tools out there. So let's talk about those.
Yeah. But one last thing on the tank mix, real quick.
Yep.
We do not recommend tank mixing Terra Vera. We always just say, use Terra Vera. The only thing we would recommend is a wetting agent. Outside of that, safer to just use Terra Vera. You are going to kill your aphids, your thrips, your mites at very specific ratios. And it's still going to also attack your fungal pathogens, your powdery mildew, aspergillus, botrytis, fusarium, pretty much any single cell organism. So, yeah, Terra Vera is not a chemistry we tank mix with, so just throwing that out there. Right tool for the right job, right?
Yep.
Everybody's probably heard that saying half a dozen times in their life, at least, hopefully. And understanding, my personal preference is always fogging. You're going to have a greater coverage. When you're fogging at anywhere, call it 2 to 5 micron, you're in the air, so you have the potential to kill spores in the air as opposed to just spraying on a plant, right? Because especially when you're talking about fungal pathogens and sporulation and spores flying up, you've got fans in a lot of these grow rooms, so you're blowing. You've also got potential aphids, you've got potential bugs that are flying around that can be carrying these spores. So fogging is always, in my opinion, going to be way more impactful than just using like a Dram Hydra or something, which I love Dram Hydras. I love that product, but I love the Dram Fogger better as an example, the cold fogger. That's just my preference. So, and then understanding the size of your garden, right? A backpack sprayer might be good, or a backpack fogger or an atomizer might be good for, call it a 2,000, maybe up to 5,000 square foot grow, but it's going to be slow. It's going to be painful for the poor person that has to carry around that backpack, go fill up another 2.5 gallons, go back and forth, back and forth. So, that's something to take into consideration. Right tool for the right job, right? If you've got a 100 or 40,000 square foot, grow room, which
Right.
I've certainly 40 to 45,000, there are very specific tools for that type of coverage. And yeah, there's and I'm sure you've got plenty. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I know you've seen a lot in the fog world. You've got some recommendations.
So yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you nailed it. It's using the right tool for the right job. The thing that I would add about a fogging application versus a spraying application, there's some things to really consider there. You touched on, the suspension of molecules in the air, which is beneficial for a lot of reasons. One, because you're applying chemistry to things that are in the air itself, but you're also increasing the exposure time to whatever your issue is. So when you spray something onto the surface of a plant, it's a direct application, and that spray is not going onto your lights. That's not going onto your fans. It's not going onto your walls. And if you're dealing with a spore problem, you're just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound, and you're not exacerbating the issue, but at the same time, you're climbing an uphill. It's an uphill battle. So fogging really, with my experience, is the most effective way of being able to treat a fungal or a pathogen issue, a mildew issue, a mold issue, because we're able to touch all of the surfaces of the plant. The other benefit to fogging that I think maybe overlooked or just a little less known is that you actually extend the amount of chemistry that you're using quite greatly. I mean, you're using a far less amount of chemistry in order to get the same amount of coverage in a more effective manner. I do recommend highly that if you're using any kind of equipment, sprayers, foggers, things of that nature, educate yourself on the micron size, educate yourself on the different types of surfactants that can be combined with that chemistry. Cannabis specifically is a very waxy plant. And although it may look wet, it really might not be. We've done a lot of microscope work here at Terra Vera to see that, you know, when you look under a microscope at that dripping wet plant, it may look wet to the eye, but when you go under a microscope, those bubbles are full. And so again, there's an added bonus there to using fog as opposed to a sprayer. You know, there's a lot of tools outside of agriculture that have come up recently with me. You know, thermal fogging and different types of atomizers. The key here is, you know, those tools may be effective in hard surface disinfection, but may not be really useful in an agricultural setting because of the temperatures that they get up to in order to create that wall of steam that's going in. And it looks really cool and it sounds really cool and it looks like it's going to reduce your labor. But I will say that if you're trying to reduce your labor and you're trying to increase your efficacy, fogging is definitely the way to go about it. Ultra low volume, or ULV, cold fogging, which keeps your chemistry in its original form rather than heating your chemistry up, which can change those molecules and render it actually inert or ineffective, is a big part of when you're looking at these different tools and these different applicators. It's something to consider.
Yeah. So as an example, you know, just talking about coverage, right? When you're looking at like a 40,000 square foot grow room or so, you might be looking into like a Night Star or something like that to try to get that kind of coverage to cover that. That's a lot of area, right? Or you're going to end up having like 20 dudes running around
Yep.
with 20 people running around with foggers and sprayers, right? So you got to think about, is it worth having, you know, a piece of equipment that can do this kind of coverage and actually cover the room and cover the walls and cover the fans and, you know, all that fun stuff? Or do you want people, you know, running around with backpacks and sprays? Then there's also like really new technology. The Breezy Blue is probably one of the coolest things I've seen come out recently. That, you know, we've certainly done tests with Terra Vera. And the really cool thing I love about that is it comes like with almost like this little cell phone type thing, and you can actually manage and monitor your saturation point, which I think is like crazy cool. Like you can put it into the room, auto fog your room. You don't even have to be in there, and you can see when you're actually reaching saturation, so you know you're getting coverage as opposed to just presuming you're getting coverage or putting out spray cards and saying, okay, well, you know, too much coverage, too little coverage, let's go back to training. So I think when you start to implement, you know, different technologies into your integrated pest management, it really can change the game in efficacy and actually, you know, achieving the goals of having a clean garden, ultimately a clean product. So.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad that you bring up Breezy Blue. Really happy to be involved with that company and being able to recommend it as highly as we do. One of the other benefits there, and you know, I think this one is, in my opinion, one of the more important ones is, and it does actually mold well into the next topic, is that it actually will log your applications and it'll log the time of your applications. It'll log the location of your application. And from, you know, my experience in operations, when you're dealing with a lot of moving parts, you're wearing 100 different hats. You don't always have the time to, you know, go down and clock these, you know, applications. Your guys are supposed to be spraying, your team's supposed to be spraying in the room. We don't know if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. And to your point, you know, using the right form of technology to help you kind of streamline those processes all the way from the very, you know, from the applicator themselves to the head of cultivation, where you actually now have a tool that you can use in order to track those applications is super important. And the way that, you know, and again, why I was happy that you were bringing it up is because it goes right into the next and probably our final topic for the day, but is a monthly IPM meeting and a review of schedule. This is something that I drive home all the time when I'm out touring farms or I'm with a client working with them. I really, really, really push people to implement some form of a IPM meeting or a review of your IPM. So let's jump into this, Darrin. And I mean, let's just start with the basics of it. Is, I mean, why is having a schedule and a meeting important when it comes to IPM?
So two things. I fully get how, specifically in cannabis, but in any company, we call it death by meeting, right? Meetings on meetings on meetings. So meetings are important, but they need to be
It's a
focused.
slow and painful death.
Oh, it is. It is. But they need to be driven and they need to be purposeful, right? So when you're having your IPM meeting,
Yep.
you're going into that meeting with a focus and a purpose. And, it's great for these single sites to have their meeting at least, call it once a month at a minimum. But for these larger companies that are, MSOs that are, all across the country and they have, IPM managers in every single state, having a cadence of at least a quarterly meeting, at a minimum, but if they can have it once a month, great. But, at least quarterly where you're getting all of your leadership for that specific target, focus of integrated pest management together. And usually I tell people, like, first start off with the bad. Hey, these are our issues, right? Try to come to the meeting prepared. Always come to a meeting prepared, I would say, but I get it. People are busy in life. But try to come with at least 2 to 3 points. Try not to come with 7. It's really hard to tackle 7 things, but it's really easy to tackle 2 or 3. And then end on a positive. Hey, this is what's working for us. And some people call it sandwich, right? End with a positive, so that way it's kind of like, the world's not falling, the sky's not falling, the world's not ending. But the main important thing about that is sharing best practices and creating that hive mind so that people can learn from each other. And in agriculture, it's really common. In horticulture, it's really common where people communicate and share information with other farmers. Cannabis wasn't really like that for a long time. I feel like it's starting to get there, which is great. But sharing best practices with other growers to say this is what's working for me, and this is what it's not. That is really important from an IPM meeting, and setting that cadence so people understand. Hey, I'm prepared. Come with your concerns. Come with what's working, and let's share that information. Create a hive mind. A little bit to add on to that, though, it
Right.
is really important that cultivators, your cultivation manager, which is oftentimes different from your IPM manager, are communicating and share and have that information, right? Because your IPM team has to be lockstep with your cultivation team. And a lot of people don't often think about that. They isolate, compartmentalize. And even your facilities team, right? People who are addressing your filters and your mechanical systems and just anything wrong, right? If they're not changing the filters out and you've got potential spores, then that affects your IPM, which affects your cultivation. So, even though you're having these meetings, maybe in a silo, sharing that information with your other team members and then having a greater meeting with them, because these departments are lockstep with each other. No one
Yep.
department survives without the other. So it's really important to, one, definitely have an IPM meeting, but understand that you're lockstep with your cultivation and your facilities department in order for everyone to be successful.
Yeah. And I drive this home quite frequently, like I said, when I'm out on site. And one of the things that I like to go into, and what I think in a lot of instances I introduce people to, is action threshold. So, if you're watching this and you think that having an IPM meeting is a good idea, setting action thresholds. And what does that mean when we talk about it? The idea of being able to, we've identified an issue. This is what we're going to do with it, and this is how we're going to move forward with it. And being able to go back on the
Oh no, I lost my Caleb again. Oh, action thresholds is where we left off, and being able to go back and understand what did work and what didn't work. And I'm assuming that's where he was going with it. I know Caleb's on the road today. He's been doing some training with some folks and some demos with some folks in New York. So if you are watching this in New York, we do have Caleb there, and he can certainly come by and give you guys a demo and teach you how to use the chemistry, teach you what the chemistry is, scientifically speaking. And I'm in Florida, so I also cover the Southeast. So if you need any support in any of those states, I'm happy to be there for you. Um, and to kind of give you an idea on Terra Vera, we are a food grade amino acid blend. The amino acids are the same amino acids that you would find in the cannabis plant. And essentially what we do is we use that in combination with RO water to create an ionic charge. through a cathode and anode. And that is what creates our chemistry and makes it applicable to the plant. We have a very specific blend of amino acids. So if you have interest, definitely reach out to Caleb or myself. We're happy to support. And we're also happy to support in other ways beyond Terra Vera in just discussing IPM strategy, how to implement some of these practices and understanding some of the tools for the right tool for the job, scheduling, application rates and when to apply, how to apply in conjunction with BCAs. So, definitely feel free to reach out. I'm Darrin. You can catch me at Darrin, Darrin, at Terra Vera, TerraVera.com. And I'm happy to be here to support. And with that, I think I'll be signing off. I'm getting texts from both Caleb and some folks on LinkedIn. So if there's any questions, feel free to reach out. I appreciate it. I don't see any questions in the chat. Signing off.